Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 206, I chat with Andrew Cross, the CTO of NewTek, about the problems facing 4K adoption. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded May 15th, 2014. Episode 206, The Problems with 4K. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek and editor of avsforum.com. This week's guest geek is Andrew Cross, the CTO of NewTek, makers of the wonderful TriCaster video switching system, which is the heart of everything we do here at the Twit Network. Hey, Andrew, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's very exciting. And man, isn't technology amazing? Can't believe we're doing this. we have this whole TV station set up. We're using Skype and TriCaster, and what used to take millions of dollars can now be done for far less and with equal quality. It's quite amazing. You know, it's funny to actually be here and doing this, to think if, you know, even 10 years ago, which isn't very, you know, that long ago, that somebody had seen this, it would have just seemed surreal that, you know, you can create a TV show that brings people in from the other side of the country, can be produced. I mean, it's just amazing what we're doing here today.
It really is. And what we're going to talk about today, though, is actually the next step beyond what we're doing here. And so we're going to get right into that as soon as I let everybody know that those who are watching live at live.twit.tv or logged into the chat room at irc.twit.tv can post questions for us as we go, and I will pass along as many as I can. Now, Andrew, the reason that I wanted to have you on the show is that I was at NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters Conference, last month, and you presented a very interesting paper called 4K, A Strategic Approach. And in that paper, you noted that we've had high definition, HD, now for only about 10 years. You know, it hasn't really been all that long. And now here we are talking about the next step. We're talking about 4K or UHD. Technically, there's a little bit of a difference between them, but the terms get used pretty interchangeably. So give us an intro to why you wrote that paper, why you presented that paper at NAB. Well, the reason I wrote it is, you know, there's so much hype around, you know, 4K. There's so many, you know, when you go to NAB, you've just got lots of engineers who are just so excited about this. And you know, if their enthusiasm could make this happen, it would happen tomorrow. Yeah, really.
But it's true. I mean, you know, you just hear about it all the time. I mean, everything you hear about these days is 4K, 4K, 4K. And actually it is, I mean, it really is staggering when you see it. But what I wanted to do is take an opportunity to actually write down and just try to look at a very objective view and try to actually, you know, put all my excitement about this, you know, to the side and, you know, kind of step through. So, you know, kind of let's just look at the landscape. What's it really going to take to make this happen? And so that was really my goal, you know, to really look at the evidence, to look at, you know, what could happen, all the options, and try to come, you know, to some conclusions that might help understand the speed that this might happen at, what we're going to see, you know, and you know, so that was really what I was trying to do, and hopefully I achieved that. I know that I got some pretty pointed questions in response. That's always a great sign right there. And I spent, you know, right after I gave the presentation, I was standing in the hallway with people kind of surrounding me, asking me difficult questions for about 2 hours. So that probably means I succeeded at what I wanted to do, really.
Indeed. So especially, you know, those engineers, most of the people that are at NAB are engineers or technical types, you know, probably hitting you with some pretty specific and pointed questions, shall we say.
Absolutely.
I was very interested in your talking about the fact that obviously we need to be working on hardware, we need to be working on software, but you also mentioned wetware, which sometimes refers to the human brain. And in your case, I think you were referring to human perception, right?
That's absolutely correct. Well, to me, the starting point of this is as I kind of sat down while I was writing this, and I thought, if I just went down to Best Buy and bought a 4K TV right now and stuck it in my living room, what would be the next step? How would I get content to it? And to me, it really seemed like there were really only three possible, ways to do that. I mean, you can get it over the air. You could get it through Ethernet, or you could walk into the house with some kind of physical medium, like a disc or something to play it back. And so those were really the only options for how you could even get the data from point A to point B, sort of telepathy that we haven't, kind of perfected quite yet. And so really, everything flows from there. And, so you mentioned kind of, the human perception side of this. And, that's kind of that's almost a non-technical thing. I mean, unfortunately, we don't understand the technology of our brains, perfectly yet. Although, we've actually made some remarkable progress in the last few years, ironically. But, that's an area we don't know that well. And, the key is actually, maybe a side note, but my PhD was actually in computer vision and understanding how we can try to make computers, interpret images and understand what's going on in them. So this is an area that's of actual particular interest to me. Now, when you think about an imaging system, if you have a standard HD, imaging system, you've got pixels that are kind of, let's say, this size, and
magnified.
Yeah, magnified a bit. And what you do is you have a lens that's on the front of the camera, and it images all the world that's in front of that lens back onto the CCD, and the pixels have this size that I gave like that. And so there's only a certain range of that physical, real world image that is completely in focus. That's just, down to the properties of the lens. And in fact, the better the lens is, the less that distance tends to be, because you like to get these very atmospheric shots that have the background out of focus and just,
right,
a small part of the image in focus. Now, what happens when you reduce the size of these pixels down to, this size instead of this size, is that the range over which, the image is perfectly in focus, the kind of the Z range over which an image is perfectly in focus at the size of the pixel becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. So as you go up in resolution, you'd think, well, the whole image becomes clearer, but in fact it doesn't. It remains, out of focus, just like it was meant to be. And the actual kind of depth that you get, a true benefit of going to 4K, is actually relatively small. And the smaller the pixels get, the smaller that range is. And so actually something I would kind of, invite any of your viewers to do is do a web search, look for a 4K image. They're easy to find, or look for even a high res. It really doesn't matter. And then zoom way in on it and see how much sharp detail there really is, because most of the image, just by virtue of the fact you used a real lens to shoot it with, is actually going to be relatively blurred, and only very small parts of the image are going to actually be sharp. And that's something that's often lost on us. And so when we're talking about 4K, we're saying about how everything's going to be so much sharper, but really only a small part of the image will be sharper. Now the counter side of this is that all computer-generated imagery, so titles, 3D stuff, actually has a huge benefit of going to 4K, because it can actually all be in focus.
Or animation. I mean, there are plenty of animated movies that are being released, and you're saying that those too would benefit from the higher resolution.
Probably, so a lot of the animated movies, those have been designed, they actually put a lot of rendering time and a lot of processing time into simulating how real lenses go. And so, there is very much depth of field in there. So they've lost, some of the benefit of it. But titles, computer games, things like that are going to see, you're going to notice the difference pretty dramatically, I think much more than video. So it's at least something interesting, to keep in mind, as we all talk about how great 4K is, which is, on a lot of video, it might not even be as noticeable as we all think it will.
Well, that's a very interesting point you make there, because, and it's sort of an adjunct to the argument I often make, which is the human, and you'll probably know this very well, the human eye only has a certain amount of resolution. You can't discern detail below a certain threshold. And in terms of a digital pixel-based display, that will depend upon the size of the screen and your distance from it. So that if you're farther than a certain distance from a given sized screen, going to 4K won't make any difference in the sharpness that you perceive. Am I right about that?
Oh, that's absolutely right. You know, the effective resolution is kind of hotly contested because, you know, we can measure how many neurons we're, you know, how many receptors we've got in our eye. Actually, a very little known fact is that our actual, the actual field of view that we have out of our eye that actually we see true color in is remarkably small. And you can do these very interesting experiments that show that almost all the color perception we have around us is actually put there by our brain and not even by our eyes, which is kind of amazing. It blew my mind when I first saw, you know, I mean, we don't think that, you know, once we get to a very wide angle display, which is what you need to get to 4K resolution, our eyes are actually not that great at even seeing color in all that area. And it's our brains filling in a lot of the detail. You know, I mean, it's kind of staggering to think about now, you know, as really even the receptors in our eyes are not where it ends because it's down to how our brain, you know, can process that information. And so it's, you know, it's much better at seeing sharp detail in things that are non-moving than moving things. And this, you know, anybody can see this. If you try to look at my lips and see the detail, you're probably not going to see it very well. If you look at the picture beside me, you'll probably see the sharp detail a lot better because your brain takes some time to actually see it. So, you know, there's all these, you know, factors that come into play where it's not even just about pixel count anymore. You know, once you're getting up towards the, you know, the limits of the resolution that the eye can see at.
Exactly. And this is another argument that I often make, which is the TV manufacturers seem to have jumped the gun a bit, if you ask me, by putting out 4K or UHD displays without really taking into account the other aspects of the picture, which haven't even been finalized for 4K yet. Dynamic range, wider color gamut, higher frame rate. I was going to ask you about that. You mentioned how the eye, the human visual system, doesn't see as sharply moving images. And one of the arguments for higher frame rate, which we saw in The Hobbit, the two Hobbit movies, Peter Jackson shot at 48 frames per second instead of 24. And a lot of people complained that didn't look natural, and that perhaps that's because we don't see motion detail that well to begin with.
That's actually a interesting point. So you actually made two very, very good and very interesting points there. The first is, you know, high dynamic range and increased gamut. You know, those are things that, so, you know, if I walked up to somebody on the street or my wife or my kids who actually know almost nothing about what I do, so they don't know much about video at all, and I put a TV set one beside the other, one that supported a higher dynamic range, you know, of intensity, basically, you know, video intensity, compared to the other one. I think that if I asked them kind of, you know, from 10 feet away, which one of these images look better, I think that you would see pretty much unanimous agreement that the image with high dynamic range with brighter whites and darker blacks would clearly look better. If I did the same with 4K, I would probably get a slightly more mixed, you know, answer. I don't think it would be quite as dramatic. And so, you know, I actually think that, you know, Dolby have been demoing, you know, some technology to increase the dynamic range of images. And I think that that's actually very exciting. You know, that's something that I'd probably go out and buy myself, you know, very, very quickly. I think that will make the image look, you know, really much better. Frame rate's interesting because actually, you know, in the original, you know, way back when cinema in its early days, they actually did a lot of studies and found out, you know, what frame rate the human eye, you know, actually perceives and, you know, understands. And it was found to be somewhere in the range of, you know, 50 frames a second seemed to be the limit. You know, having spent way too much of my life now looking at images, I clearly see a huge difference myself in frame rate. You know, something that is at 30p, and it depends a bit on what you're looking at, but something, you know, that's at 30p looks really kind of, you know, movie-like, but kind of juddery to me compared to, you know, 60 or maybe even 120 frames a second. Those are, you know, I think that those look clearly smoother, and most people would qualify them as looking smoother. for movies, that might not actually be the, what you're trying to get. And there's kind of this mental, image of what we think a movie is that I think clearly is playing into the kind of reaction that there was to what Peter Jackson did. I mean, most people go to a movie expecting it to be a certain way. But, sports, for instance, if you tried to watch sports at 30p, it's really not going to look that great. If you watch it at 60, it looks really dramatically better. In fact, kind of something that I'm not sure that a lot of people noticed is that actually, so Microsoft recently put out a big announcement about having I think it was ESPN, I'm not sure which TV network it was, showing sports on the Xbox. And one of the big benefits of what they were doing is actually they made a big deal about it being actually at 60 frames a second. I
know that ESPN and Fox and ABC, for that matter, all do 720p 60 in their broadcast signals. I think for the exact reason that you say, that because they show a lot of sports.
Yeah, well, it's all about, if you've got a ball here in one frame and then at 30 frames a second, it moves right over here. It looks very, juddery. If you do the twice the frame rate, it goes from, here just to here. And so it just tends to look an awful lot better for sports where there's an awful lot of, fast moving, small detail going on the field. And I mean, it's quite noticeable, actually. If you go to YouTube and watch a sports game where, most of it's 30 frames a second and compare that to TV, there's a big difference. And I actually think that this is very important because, a lot of the discussions around 4K so far, and most of the manufacturers, not all, but most of the manufacturers seem to be, bringing out cameras and devices that are 30p, so they're 4K P30, which is actually very, very good and for independent movie production. But for live events, where sports is probably the biggest single, kind of live market out there, that's probably not going to be quite good enough. And we really need to get to 60p, for 4K sports probably to take off. And, sports is the thing to watch because that's one of the few things where customers are actually prepared to actually pay more money to watch in higher quality.
That's a very good point. And I know they're going to shoot the World Cup, I think, which is coming up later this year in 4K. And I think Japan's actually shooting it in 8K. But that's sort of a different issue a little bit. But so I hope that they're going to shoot that in 4K 60 if the cameras even exist. I don't recall. I didn't spend a lot of time looking at cameras at NAB. I don't know if you did or not, but is there anything that one could shoot 4K at 60?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, cameras have been one of the, the driving factors in all of this. Cameras, in large part down to, cell phones have been one, I mean, the consumer market has consumed literally billions of cell phones a year over the last, 3 or 4 years. And so, because those cell phones have all got, cameras built into them these days, there's been this huge economy of scale that's allowed people to build much cheaper, much high resolution CCDs that have, very high data rate on and off the cameras. And so, really, cameras have been at the forefront of the move to 4K almost more than anything else. Recently, actually, the increase in resolution on displays that are used in mobile phones is what's driven the ability for us to build these ultra high resolution screens. And it's actually kind of funny that these high resolution screens existed in cell phones long before they did it on. It was on the iPhone before it was on the MacBook. The iPhone had Retina first. And so it's actually most of the 4K, the revolution has been driven by mobile technology more than anything else. And it's kind of interesting to observe that really what's happened is that the two ends of the pipeline have been what's filled in first. You've got the cameras on one side and you have the displays on the other. And our problem right now is everything that goes in between the two and getting the data from one to the other. And
this was in fact the main thrust of your paper that I wanted to spend a lot of time talking about today was that bottleneck.
Absolutely. I mean, we have there are multiple levels of bottleneck. The obvious one that a lot of people are talking about is, the bandwidth from camera to display at the end of the day. And I'm I may be jumping to an assumption here that this is live. For non-live, it's all a bit different. For video on demand, some of these equations work out kind of differently, because you could do things like, preemptive downloading of part of the show so that you don't actually need to maintain the full bandwidth the whole time. We could, that's possible. Now, there are some actual impediments to that, because I think that, there are going to be issues with how copywriters handled that and licensing agreements, because having a temporary copy that got downloaded might not be within the existing licenses for some, some of the current content providers. And so there's definitely some issues there. But once it's video on demand, it's maybe a slightly different question for live. And, I'm focusing largely on live when I'm saying, hey, we've got to get the data from the camera to the display. But we do focus a lot on the bandwidth that's needed to get it there. But, there's a lot of processing issues as well. And we tend to overlook those because everybody just, kind of assumes that computers are really, really fast these days, and they are. But at the same time, typical, modern technology or modern processing technology, which exists at all the steps along the way, right from the, the encoding of the video to the mixing of the video to the, transmission to the displaying of the video on the other end, is pretty much governed by Moore's law. And, Moore's law kind of says that CPUs about double in speed every 3 years or so. There are slightly different interpretations of Moore's law. But, with 4K, certainly when you're talking about 4K P60, you're actually talking about 8 times the pixel rate of, say, 1080i or 720p today. And so that is about 6 years worth of processing advances before you can get like for like. And as anybody who's been following the kind of microprocessor field over the last few years, it's been really hard keeping Moore's law alive. We've managed to make much smaller processors. We've gone to lots of cores. We're making mobile processors much cheaper, much quicker, a lot of progress there. But in terms of the actual, maximum performance you can get out of a single processing core, we've not made that much progress in the last few years. And that is actually a critical factor in all of this, because if we're going to get this many more pixels through the chain, you've got to process it somehow. And it's not just going to come for free in this day and age. And, and that's a real challenge that I think a lot of people are facing. To make that even worse, there's this wonderful H.265 standard, which actually is, if you're into video compression, it's really quite a feat of engineering. I mean, it's really amazing. It's about somewhere in the range of 30 to 50% more efficient per byte to push down a wire than H.264 is.
By the way, pardon me for interrupting, but just for those who might not understand, HEVC stands for High Efficiency Video Codec. It's the next generation of compression algorithm beyond what we currently use, typically H.264. HEVC is also H.265, got all this alphabet soup to deal with. But the current one, H.264 or AVC, Advanced Video Codec, both are means of reducing the amount of data that actually has to get squirted down the pipe. And they remove far more data than they keep, don't they? Both of them.
Oh, it's absolutely staggering. I mean, if what they do, I mean, is imagine, if you will, that you wrote down 1,000 numbers on a page. They can cut this down about 100 to 1. So they can take about 1,000 numbers and get an image out of just 10 that looks almost as good as, I mean, it's staggering when you think about it that way. We're used to talking about it in megabits per second, but what these encoding schemes do is just staggering. I mean, it's really amazing technology that is behind them. Now, the problem is that the amount of processing that's required both to do the encoding side of things and the decoding side of things increases dramatically when you increase the compression. And so, on the decoding side, it's about 3 times harder to decode this magical new HEVC or H.265 stream as it was, the kind of existing AVC or H.264. So, what a lot of people are saying is, that one of the ways we're going to get to 4K is that we're going to move to this new compression format. The problem is that it's about 2 to 3 times harder to decode. And because of that, it's going to generate about 2 to 3 times as much heat if it's a cell phone, or and we're forgetting that there are literally billions of devices out there in the world that are just not going to be capable to decode this signal. So even if we could put it on the air today, we're going to have to maintain backwards compatibility with all those devices. And so these efficiency gains are only as good as your ability to take away the thing you had before, because otherwise you're actually going to do both at the same time. And so you've just got a whole bunch of complications, associated with this that are, a lot of the people talking about these amazing technical benefits, which really are there. I mean, it's staggering technology, but it's not quite as simple as that in the real world.
Mm-hmm. By the way, before I forget, QNX Monkey in the chat room is asking, is your paper publicly available?
Gosh, I believe that it is. I cannot say that completely sure, because I have this policy where I don't actually ever watch myself on camera or read things that I've written once they're out there, because it always kind of stresses me out. So I haven't actually gone and checked, but I believe that it was published at the by the NAB. I should have a better answer to that. I'm embarrassed that I don't, but I've not gone looking to read it. So
that's all right. I think if anybody is interested, they could go to the NAB website. It's probably nab.org. I didn't look myself, but that would be one place to look. Maybe at some point, you could put your paper up on your own website. If people were interested, that would be another way to do it, possibly.
Absolutely. I should definitely look at that. I kind of assumed that nobody would really have an interest in reading it beyond the, the people who came to my presentation, but I should absolutely do that.
Hey, this show is called Home Theater Geeks, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got plenty of geeks in the audience here. Okay, well, you were talking about we were talking about compression efficiency and the fact that the newer the compression, the greater the compression, the more processing power is needed, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier about processors needing to be more and more powerful. I've written for many years how Moore's law can't continue forever, because at some point those individual transistors, those individual gates on a chip, are going to get down to the molecular and atomic level, and then where do we go from there? I mean, it's done, right? Unless we can come up with quantum computers, which people are working on, but that's far away.
Well, first of all, I would never underestimate how smart some of the engineers working at these CPU manufacturers are these days. They're really doing amazing things. We are quite a way off being down at the actual, atomic level, although, it's not as far as anybody would actually think.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe much more importantly is the economics of getting smaller and smaller are becoming increasingly difficult. I shouldn't pick on them, because what they're doing is truly staggering. But if you look, Intel just announced the Rockwell chipsets, but actually have kind of let slip that the Rockwell is about 6 months behind schedule. And a big part of that is just that down at the 12 nanometer level, which is where they're going, the technology and the processes needed to reliably build, chips that size is just unbelievable. And the investment needed is billions of dollars. And every process improvement, it goes up and up and up. And unfortunately, you have to pay for that somehow. And the market for those chips is not growing as fast as the cost of building them. And so, at some point, even short of technology, we might just run into, real economic factors that make doing this increasingly harder.
Sure.
Although I should say that people have been making that prediction for a long time. But it still is true. I mean, this cannot go on forever, and I don't think that anybody is saying that it will. And in fact, I think a lot of the key market analysts are kind of warning that, hey, there's assumptions that next year's computers are going to be a lot faster than this year's and cheaper. Probably, the people should be a bit careful about making those assumptions now.
What you just said kind of reminds me of particle physics, in which you try to accelerate particles faster and faster, closer and closer to the speed of light, and you get past a certain point, and it takes enormously more energy to just get a little bit faster. Similarly here, as you get smaller and smaller and smaller, it starts taking exponentially more money, tons more money, just to get a tiny bit smaller. So there may be as you say, a limiting factor there as well.
Oh, that's absolutely right. And actually, we often talk about we often talk about the limits of physics and what we're going to be able to be able to achieve. But really, the thing determining that this technology in the real world is much more the law of economics about what we can affordably choose to produce. Because that's really the limit on this: is can we make CPUs that people are actually going to pay and put in their machines, and we're going to sell enough of to pay back the investment needed to build them, and and that's the real law here, much more than the law of physics.
Mm-hmm. Similar to oil extraction. It's becoming harder and harder, more and more expensive, I should say, to extract oil out of the ground. And at some point, that'll become prohibitively expensive as well.
Yes, although I'm actually calling you from Texas, where there's a lot of fracking going on now, and they have improved the processes a lot. This is affordable today, and it didn't used to be long ago. So as I was saying, we should never underestimate what smart engineers with the right incentives can do. Whatever we predict, they'll find some way to prove us wrong. But on microprocessors, we really are down at the level of what might even be physically possible, or we're within a couple of orders of magnitude of that. Which is saying, quite something about, humans' ability to innovate and progress and technology, really.
Yeah, yeah. Well, another bottleneck that you mentioned in your paper that I wanted to make sure we discussed was the internet itself. I just read a thing today that said Netflix accounts for 1/3 of the peak internet usage today, and YouTube is another 13%. And yet, you say in the paper, most ISPs deliver around maybe 300 megabits per second or so to neighborhoods, which might have hundreds of homes. And so that's got to get divided out. I do know that in the United States, the average bandwidth available to people in their homes is, I don't know, I think we're number 27th in the world or something like that. It's down around 3 megabits per second. That's obviously a huge bottleneck, especially when it comes to 4K.
Yes, I mean this is definitely a problem, and actually there are all these charts that show the growth of video on the internet. So you made some great quotes about year on year the amount of video going over the internet is increasing dramatically. I mean Netflix, I've seen numbers that actually show that at sometimes a day it can be up to 45% of North American web traffic, which is just staggering. But yeah, I mean it's staggering. But the biggest part of this is not coming from a growth of resolution and a growth of data rates of the people who are watching, but the number who are watching. And that's something that a lot of these numbers actually hide, which is it's not that people are now able to watch at much higher resolution. So that's where this increase in bandwidth is going. It's just that there's far more people actually doing it. Now so we kind of got almost a double problem here, because we've got a massively increasing number of viewers who are watching video on the internet, and that clearly is going to grow for the largely foreseeable future. I mean, we're all part of that, and we're contributing to it right now, hopefully.
Indeed.
But not only that, but if the resolutions need to go up, it's not just the number of viewers that are increasing, but also the amount of data that each viewer takes. And unfortunately, our rate of bandwidth to each individual viewer in North America has not been growing very fast at all. And that is a definitely something that if we want to see certainly Ultra HD over the internet, that's going to have to change. I mean, the average customer today in North America probably can view 720p 30 content. And it will look pretty decently good and probably reliable enough, other than some terrible times of day maybe. But we're talking about 4K, and what we're saying is that the average house has not quite yet made it to 1080i or 1080p, and so there's quite a leap there. Now, like all these technologies, 4K itself is, there's going to be some set of customers who are prepared to pay for that, and they will be the early adopters, and those will exist. And you can probably, in most areas of North America, buy enough bandwidth to get it today if you're prepared to pay for it. But in terms of widespread adoption, I think we actually have, quite a long way to go. Netflix is saying that it's going to take about 15 megabits. I tried to test on my home line that says it can do about 15 megabits, and I couldn't sustain, 15 megabits down. So, maybe in a few years I'll be able to, but, there's some ways to go yet still.
Yeah, exactly. on avsforum.com, my partner Mark Henninger does many comparisons of the various streaming models or streaming sources that are available now, and compares them to Blu-ray. And of course, Blu-ray beats them just about every time, although Vudu HDX is apparently coming pretty close. Now, he's got a downstream bandwidth at his home of like 100 megabits.
Wow.
So he's paying a pretty penny for that. But, you know, he should be able to see 4K when it comes along, and probably a disproportionate number of members of AVS have a higher than average bandwidth. But you're talking about average bandwidth here. And for the vast majority of people, it's going to take a long time. I loved what you said in your paper about, you know, it's going to take, you know, hard hats and jackhammers to actually make any big improvements overall in the bandwidth available to American homes.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, we're used to, you know, this massive rate of progress in almost all the devices we buy. You know, your cell phone every year, you know, is twice the speed the year before, high resolution, more memory. And so we're used to this incredible rate of growth that's occurring, you know, through basically our ability to, you know, build products out of electronics. But unfortunately, you know, internet, we need to go out there and lay more lines, and that's something that you can't just do in a chip plant somewhere. You've got to pay somebody to go out there with a shovel and, you know, a shovel and a roll of wire and actually lay it down. And so there's some real limits. And, you know, when I look out my window here today, I don't see people doing that kind of stuff. And that means to me that it's not just about to happen next year. And so, you know, you know, hopefully it's going to happen. I mean, I hope for all of us it's going to happen, because it'll be truly amazing when it does. But, you know, the progress in terms of laying down lines is not as fast as many of the other things that we get used to. And it's often, you know, it's easy to lose sight of that when, you know, we're used to just such rapid progress in so many areas.
Yeah, exactly. So I was looking here to see if I had any questions in the chat room. By the way, chat room, if you do have a question and you want me to see it easily, use my screen name, Scott Wilkinson, all one word, no dots or dashes, because then it'll show up on my display as a different color. And then I'll be able to, my eye will be drawn right to it. So I'm just, in case you do have questions that I'm missing, I apologize for that. So let me just pull back my notes here and see where we have gone. I wanted to mention that we're talking about bandwidth. We're talking about the internet and the problems there. But that's likely to be the first means of distributing 4K. As you said, there are basically three ways to do it: online, over the air, or cable or satellite, but I don't see that happening anytime soon, or a physical disc, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. I know the Blu-ray Disc Association is talking about it, but we're not going to see a physical disc for a while. And there are many who even predict that physical disc is out anyway, that online is really the only way that things are going to get distributed. Yes,
I mean, physical discs, I mean, you know, physical discs also are very limited. I mean, you know, just in terms of the kind of content you can put on a physical disc, if we were trying to do this show, it clearly is not compatible with physical discs.
So, right.
You know, physical discs can never be a complete 4K solution. Physical discs at best can be for movies and certain, you know, kinds of shows. But it's, you know, they can only ever account for a small percentage of, and really an increasingly small percentage of what actually people watch. And kind of something that I've actually found very interesting is, it seems to me that people are remarkably, you know, the industry in general, the consumers in general are remarkably unprepared to pay more for physical discs of higher quality. Because, you know, when I go over to Walmart, which probably represents, you know, a very large part of the North American, you know, where people go to buy movies and so on, you know, most of the discs there are still that are being bought are DVDs and not Blu-rays, and that's SD. You know, I mean, that's 480p, and so you know, a lot of people have not yet been prepared to pay for Blu-ray, let alone what the next step would be. And I would say that the visual difference between a DVD and a Blu-ray is probably higher than what we will see between a Blu-ray and a 4K discs. So, you know, discs, I mean, at best, it's going to be a small part of the market, and I'm just not convinced that we're going to be able to persuade the buying public in large to go and buy a large number of 4K discs. And if they don't, the cost of players are not going to come down. You just end up with this kind of, chicken and egg problem where you can't buy really cheap players. And, so discs, it doesn't seem likely, over the air. I've actually got a really good friend, a really nice guy who works for a TV station, and he was actually visiting us here in Texas, and I sit down with him and I say, hey, what do you think of 4K? And he actually laughed. He said, we've only just managed the transition to HD over the air, and the FCC are trying to get us to give up spectrum today. So seriously, you're talking about 4K. And on top of that, they can't take, because over the air we're trying to accommodate, the public as a whole. You can't take the HD signals off the air for probably 10 or 20 years to come. So you're going to have to find new spectrum to put these 4K signals on. So, I just can't see that happening fast. So that really does just leave the internet as the distribution means. And so, as goes the internet, probably goes 4K in my opinion. And so that's why I watch, very closely what's happening with bandwidth on the internet as an indicator of the adoption of 4K.
What about, talking about physical disk, what about hard disks? We've seen the Sony server. We've seen Samsung is going to have a server. The Red Ray player. All should be able to download. That's different from streaming. It doesn't require, a fast bandwidth during the show, but downloading something into a hard disk server, that seems to me to be possibly a viable solution.
Absolutely. And in fact, if you think about the biggest innovations that have occurred in TV over the last, let's say, 10 years, actually time shifting is one of them. And this is just, the natural extension of time shifting, which is, you can say kind of upfront kind of what you want to watch, and then you watch it when, when you're ready. And so that makes, for certain kinds of shows, they're very compatible with download. It does still limit, what you do. Live sports, which is one of the big driving influences in TV, and as a result, most people are buying new TVs to watch sports on. Let's be completely honest. They care more about their sports than their, I was going to say kids, but most people won't own up to that. They care. But people are prepared to pay more to get a big TV to watch sports on, and so sports are definitely a big driving factor in any of the forefront of video technology. And that doesn't really lend itself great to the download of content. There are a lot of other things that do, though. And so, clearly it's they are going to be part of the picture. And I do think that, today, if you want to solve 4K without needing people to be out in the streets with hard hats solving all our bandwidth problems, that is always going to take time and cost money. Kind of preemptive downloading of material is probably the most likely way we're going to get there. It does limit, though, what you're going to watch, when you're going to be able to watch it, and all of those things, hamper broad market adoption of 4K somewhat. I do think that's where we're going to see it first, though. If I had to make a bet, that's where it would be.
Mike Heiss in the chat room, a good friend and previous guest on this show, is asking, what about potential problems with audio delay at the endpoint with all the heavy compression from HEVC? Well,
since he says compression, I assume that he's talking about the transmission side of it, not the viewing side of it. So we're doing the compression. That shouldn't be a problem as long as you have a properly implemented system that you're using. Most modern systems are going to take the audio and the video in as in-sync streams, and will maintain the synchronization through the processing chain. Live HEVC compression, though, is not really a non-trivial task. If you look, there's some papers on this about, out there on a general purpose CPU, HEVC compression at the same resolution takes somewhere in the range of about 50 to 100 times as much processing power as H.264 did. So, maybe to simplify, the next gen of compression is about 100 times or 50 to 100 times harder to compress at the same resolution. That's before we go to 4K as the current generation. In fact, what any viewers are probably watching now. So it's about 50 times harder than that. And that's actually a real problem. I mean, that means that while we can do real-time encoding of a show now, it's going to be an awful lot harder when we're using general purpose, if we want to use general purpose computing devices to do that encoding, to do that in the on the next generation of compression. So really, HEVC, to me, today, for it to work, has to have silicon on the compression side. We cannot do this in general purpose computing right now. And since that silicon, it doesn't easily exist today, it's certainly not in most computers, that's going to place some limits on the adoption of, say, like, live streaming, certainly on live shows like this one.
I've seen a couple of TVs claim to have HEVC decoding in them already. I'm curious, you might not know this, but I'm curious to know if that is dedicated silicon or, a general purpose processor.
Oh, it's just got to be general. It's just got to be dedicated silicon. The power consumption of, I mean, on these devices, it's all about really the performance you get per watt, and doing it in dedicated silicon is just, vastly more efficient than general purpose computing. In fact, and this is, one of the things I kind of hinted at when I said that on the decode side, decoding on a general purpose, computer, HEVC, is about 2 to 3 times harder than H.264. This matters because we all have cell phones. I have one right beside me. I'm sure you do. If we wanted to display HEVC on those cell phones to get some of the bandwidth savings on them, it would have to be decoded on the processor, which probably on a modern cell phone is fast enough to do it. The problem is that it would make your battery life be about 30 minutes of doing that. You just really need silicon to do this stuff currently. And that limits us because we've got, as I said, billions of these devices out there that aren't going away anytime soon. Yeah.
I think Mike's point, though, about audio delay, I suspect, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong here in the chat room, that, as you say, the encoding and decoding both of HEVC is so processor intensive that it takes a while, and therefore we just better be sure that the audio, which isn't going to take much time at all, is delayed to the point where it's still in sync with the video. I mean, we all know about AV receivers and TVs have this lip sync feature, right, which lets you delay the audio with respect to the video so they sync up. I imagine this is going to be more of a problem with HEVC no matter how it's implemented.
It really shouldn't be. Technologically speaking, there's absolutely no reason for this. I mean, it shouldn't be that. And hopefully, in fact, this will make sure that all the manufacturers and the software vendors actually really work out how to solve this problem if it is really worse for HEVC. There's no technical reason that we can't keep these streams completely in sync. And today this isn't a very complicated problem. Fingers crossed. That's easy to say for me sitting here, but this shouldn't be a difficult problem to solve. I should also actually say that although HEVC is much harder to decompress, if you're doing it in real time, you still have to do it in real time. So your delay from in to out can't actually increase that much, because otherwise, if it gets longer and longer and longer, it's slower than real time. That's when you'd run into these problems. And so really, it's more of a latency problem than it is a actual compression problem. I know that might, I spend too much time thinking about these, so it might not be terribly easy to understand quite what I'm saying. But I don't think that this is going to be a huge problem for us. Audio sync shouldn't be a problem. And if it is, somebody needs to give, us people who are actually working on this technology, a really hard time.
One thing in your paper that you mentioned, I just want to make sure that everybody understands, is that implementing HEVC decoding in a general purpose processor is very, very difficult to do. And as you said in your paper, this is the largest single impediment to the adoption of 4K.
Yes, I mean, it is. It's all about the viewers. If the viewers can't see a high bandwidth HEVC stream, the broadcasters, it's not worth them broadcasting it. And the fact that it takes a really fast, a fast computer to display these, and computers are not where people are watching video. That's the problem. I mean, some of us are. but the majority of people are watching it on their iPads, on their tablets, on their phones, on their TVs, and those don't have fast enough general purpose computing devices in them to do full, certainly not 4K, decoding of HEVC streams now. And so, and the problem is that there's just billions of these devices. They're not going away, I mean, so they have to be accounted for. And that, really creates a problem, for the people wanting to put out these streams. Right now they can only target a very small part of the market unless they do both.
Mm-hmm. I just got another note from Mike about this. He's more concerned with the decode side than the encode side, and especially when you layer on what might become heavy audio demands with object-based audio systems that might be coming down the pike. Right now, Dolby Atmos, Auro 3D, some of these sound systems that are only available in commercial cinemas may very well come to the home, in which case the audio decoding and processing demands will increase.
Audio, the amount of data in a modern, even in an HD audio stream, is about the equivalent of one line of the video. It's true. And, so
all right.
Audio should be very easy for us these days.
All right.
If it's not, it's almost certainly more down to a design problem on the product that's doing it as it is a processing problem. I mean, audio should be almost free for us these days, and we should be able to transmit as many channels as we want of the stuff.
So we've been talking a lot about problems, the impediments to adoption of 4K, bandwidth problems and processing problems, all this stuff. But your paper was ultimately titled "A Strategic Approach." So what do you see as the strategic approach to solving these problems and getting 4K to the home?
So first of all, I should say, and the first slide of my presentation actually had the words 4K is going to happen, although I put an asterisk beside it that got me in some trouble in the questions. But I do believe that 4K is most likely to happen, and I'll define most likely for you, right after this. So I think that the natural trend, technology is clearly moving in that direction. We're definitely, all the pieces are falling into place. And, really my goal when I said a strategic approach was to highlight that it's not going to happen in, this year or next year. It's going to take some time for this to become a consumer thing. And I just wanted to emphasize to people so that, that they're aware of that, because there's just so much hype around this, particularly at NAB, that, I wanted people to see where technology really was going to go. And if you add up the numbers, how they pan out. Now, to me, it seems obvious. I mean, there's so much talk of 4K. People want it. People want to create it. The technologists, the technology people like you and myself love 4K. And so, all the momentum is there for it to happen. And, the reason, though, that I put an asterisk beside my comment that 4K is going to happen is that from everything I can see, it's going to take some time for it to happen. And at the same time, technology is really advancing very, very fast on so many fronts. And so it's certainly not outside of the question that in the time between, now and when 4K would meet, broad consumer acceptance, that some other technology just becomes more important to people. And, it would be very foolish of us not to keep an eye on that, I'll tell you, I don't know if you've ever used VR glasses, like the Oculus Rift.
Not to any great length, just to, put them on at a trade show.
Well, I would strongly recommend that everybody watching does it. I was a non-believer in this. I did not have them, but one of the engineers I worked with brought a pair to work. I sat down and I was blown away. I went away thinking, wow, I've got to buy this. This is what I want to play with at home. And now I don't know if it's that, but there's so many cool things happening. You can't go online and look at a technology blog these days without some technology which you look at and go, wow, this is almost like science fiction. And here we are talking about, 4K just because of, all the needs taking, in the range of 5 to 10 years to become a global technology. And it'd be really short-sighted of us not to think, that in that time, something that just, is more important couldn't come along. And that is what we all need to keep an eye on. And that's, one of the most exciting things about what we're doing is, maybe there's something that's just going to change everything for us. I would not rule that out. And that's, man, it would be exciting, wouldn't it?
Well, yes. On the other hand, a couple things come to mind. One is with regard to these VR headsets like the Oculus Rift. Sony made one as well. One thing comes to mind is if people don't like wearing 3D glasses in the theater, how will they react to wearing this big giant thing on their head? I mean, that seems to me to be orders of magnitude more cumbersome and uncomfortable. And yet I don't have experience with it myself, so I can't really say.
Well, who knows? And I actually gave that not as an example of what I think will happen. I just gave it an example of how technology is progressing so fast and there's so many exciting things coming out that, saying that over a 10-year course, which is what I think it will take for all of us, every one of us, to have an internet, to have internet that's fast enough to view 4K and to have a 4K in our living rooms, and for the producers to have got the full 4K pipeline in place. That's really that's the time that it took for HD, and it actually took longer than that from the day we were starting. It would be foolish of us not to say, man, things are progressing really fast in a lot of technologies, and let's disregard all that, and this is what's going to happen. I mean, we just, who knows? I mean, the things are changing real fast. There's a lot of cool stuff out there, and in terms of whether that will be cool enough, somewhere in here, there's some level of what consumers and viewers will trade off in terms of one thing for another, and maybe VR glasses are that, maybe they're not, and the market's gonna tell us that, and man, it's exciting times to be doing this stuff, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. One other thing that comes to mind is how I think TV manufacturers, I said it earlier, have jumped the gun with 4K TVs coming out now, and they're going to be coming out more and more and more before the infrastructure is in place, which means to me that the upscaler in those TVs had better be really good, because mostly what people are going to be watching is high def, regular, quote unquote, standard high def, upscaled to that new resolution in the same color space that we now use, with the same dynamic range that we now use. So those TVs that are coming out now really aren't even ready for what's going to happen in 5 years.
I mean, you're right. I mean, upscalers, there's actually an analogy that is almost the exact parallel of what you're saying, which is, most TVs out there do 120 frames per second or more. And there is no 120 frame or 240 frame per second video anywhere other than, on the production side in replay systems. But there is no standard into the house, and there's not even any talk of standard into the house that I'm aware of about super high frame rates. And yet every television has the capability of doing it today. And so this is pretty much the exact parallel of what you're saying in terms of resolution, which is, there's going to be lots of 4K sets out there, but there's no 4K signal coming to them. And so, those are very close things. Upscaling technology is very cool. There's a lot of really advanced stuff doing there that, a few years ago would have blown people's mind. And there's definitely some, very advanced things that you can do. The same with dynamic range. There's an awful lot of processing going on in these TV sets these days that aim to make, and I should really say aim to make the signal look better, because it's very debatable on some of these TV sets whether it actually does. But there's certainly an awful lot going on in these TV sets. There's gigaflops of processing in them these days, and there's a lot you can do with that.
Yeah. I also debate whether or not it makes the picture better, because my goal is to make the picture as close to what the content creator intended in the color grading suite, where they actually put the thing together to send to me as a consumer, than to expand the color gamut beyond what they wanted, because who knows whether those colors would be where they should be or not, or expand the dynamic range. It's really a form of distortion.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, seeing it how it was meant to be seen is the goal. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily what sells TV sets, because what sells TV sets is hugely saturated colors with very, very bright black levels. Don't matter so much when you're in a big box store that has lots of fluorescent lights on in it, and that tends to be unfortunately what sells TV sets. It's much like the audio world as well, I guess. And there are going to be some of us, like I'm sure there's far higher than average concentration of them watching us here today, and yourself, who actually, appreciate those things.
Yes.
And let's hope that there's enough of the world that see the benefits, that, that it makes enough sense for manufacturers to start actually looking at, doing that seriously, because, it would be better for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Well, last question then. Is the TriCaster currently capable of doing 4K, or obviously you probably have that on your roadmap at some point?
Oh, I would have the marketing guys come and drag me out of this room if I said anything about what we're doing next. You just see me disappear. I'll tell you,
the hook would come out.
Yeah, that's probably pretty much the case. It'd make a great viral video probably, but
exactly.
This is what I can say. We have really cool stuff. I mean, we're thinking about all sorts of cool things. We have this, engineering at NewTek is often called kind of Area 51. And, we try to do all this cool stuff. We try to play with technologies. We try to do things that might ultimately turn out to be nothing, but sometimes work out into the coolest things. It would be crazy to think that we're not thinking about this, that we're not thinking about lots of other things. We try to have fun. We try to love what we do, and we try to do things that I see my goal as not to take the next little predictable step, but to try to look at something that's bigger than that and try to make something that changes the world. In a small way, the TriCaster's done that. We can be here having a TV show today that was totally unimaginable 20 years ago and difficult 10 years ago. And, we were producing video that was going out onto the web before there was such a thing as a CDN. And we're always looking for what that next, major jump is. And that's why I love my job. That's why I love looking at these things. That's why I love the technology. And man, it's a great time to be doing this. It really is. Yeah,
it sure is. Sentinel in the chat room said, neural implant like the Matrix. Maybe that's in your Area 51, huh?
Oh, my neural implant that's up here now is telling me I'm not allowed to answer that question.
I won't press you. That's totally fine. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for a fascinating hour. It's been great, and thanks for being here.
It was my pleasure. I've enjoyed it hugely. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it.
You bet. My pleasure. That's Andrew Cross, the CTO of NewTek, makers of the TriCaster video switching system, which is used here at the TWiT network for all of the podcasts we produce, talking about 4K and the problems and the promise thereof. So do hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You can find me, oh, by the way, you can find more information about NewTek, of course, at newtek.com, NEWTEK.com. And you can find me, of course, at avsforum.com. You can also email me at scott@twit.tv, and you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott, also at avsforum. And you can find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here at twit.tv/HTG, and on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/twit Home Theater Geeks. Next week, I have two guest geeks scheduled, Barb Gonzalez and Mark Henninger, both of whom are streaming mavens. We're going to be talking about the new Amazon Fire TV streaming box, and both of them have quite a bit of experience with it now, and so we will be sharing that with all of you. So I do hope you will join us. Until then, geek out.